Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 51 of The Murder Project. I'm excited to be back with you guys again this week and starting a new episode. We have a good one for you this week, as we usually do, and the reason that Mike and I decided to do this case is because we were talking about it, and it has a lot of value as far as the debrief goes. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the part one and let you guys kind of understand what we're going to be talking about in the debrief, because that's how we do it here. So this should be a very interesting case as far as the details go, as far as kind of motive goes, what the backstories of people are, what influences or substance abuse problems, anything like that that can kind of go into a case. This has a little bit of all of that. Mental health problems, things of that nature. All of this is kind of included in this case. And then the story itself is very bizarre. So I'm excited to bring you guys this case. And without further ado, let's get the episode started. So this case takes place on July 16th, 2011. And the location of the incident is going to be Port St. Lucie, Florida. This is an area that is about 100 miles north of Miami, Florida. It's kind of an area that was, from what I understand, most of the research that I have from this case comes from a Rolling Stones article. It's called Tyler Hadley's Killer Party, the Shocking Florida House Party Murders. And the reason why I decided to go with this one specifically is because it had a lot of information in it, a lot of details between conversations between multiple people, text message conversations, and things like that. So I think as far as this case goes, I'm just going to stick with the information I found in that Rolling Stones article because it was so thorough. So as I mentioned, this case is in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And originally, this area was kind of, the founding of it started in 1961 when a investor group bought the area. Kind of was 40,000 acres of swamp and pine flatwood forest. And so they bought this in the hopes of subdividing the land and then selling it off to people, which they did. And the way that they did this was they kind of promised the fulfillment of the Florida dream. And I think that we all kind of know that Florida is known as a retirement area, and a lot of people migrate to Florida every single year. And so this became an opportunity for them to be able to sell this subdivided land and, turn it for a profit. And it looks like it worked. I mean, it seemed to me like it was kind of slow rolling, but in 1961 is whenever they kind of got the ball rolling. By 1980, 19 years later, the population was at about 15,000. And then if you fast forward to 2006, the population is 150,000. So it's definitely growing as far as population goes. I think from the information that I read on this area, it's pretty much settled out. It is kind of known as a retirement area, or it was previous to this. Now the median age of, I think, the people that live in the town is a lot younger, and there is a larger population of young adults in this area. And it's also mentioned that in the research that I did that a lot of the teens that live in this area complain that nowadays there's nothing to do there, and apparently there hasn't been much to do there since the founding of the town, but it's always kind of been known for that older climate, older people living in the area. So for younger people, it's a little bit of a boring location, boring spot. There's nothing to do. So kind of house parties and kids hanging out with each other and things like that have been what kids have been doing there for a long time. And from what I understand, that's still kind of the situation as far as that town goes. So getting into a little bit of the story, we're going to have three main characters in this story, Blake and Mary Jo Hadley. This is Tyler Hadley's parents. And at the time that the incident occurs, Blake is 54 years old, Mary Jo is 47, and Tyler is 17. Now, going back to how the Hadleys ended up in Port St. Lucie is Blake and Mary Jo decided to move from their home that they lived in Fort Lauderdale, and they did this 24 years before the incident occurred. They had another son that was Tyler's older brother, but they had moved to this area before either of the kids were born. Now, at the time, Tyler's brother was living in North Carolina, I believe, or South Carolina, and he was going to college, so he wasn't around when all of this took place. So for that purpose, I'm going to leave him out mostly because he wasn't involved in the case. But just know that Tyler did have an older brother that he lived with previous to all this with his parents, Blake and Mary Jo. Now, when his parents moved to Port St. Lucie, they moved there because Blake's parents had retired in a neighboring town. And so they wanted to move close to that area so that Blake could be closer to his parents. Blake worked as a watch engineer at the St. Lucie nuclear power plant. And at the time of the incident, he had been there for approximately 30 years. Mary Jo was a elementary school teacher. And from what I understand, they had a pretty solid reputation in the town. And also, one of the things that's kind of brought up in the article is that they had really stable jobs, so they didn't have to worry about the housing market's kind of roller coaster ride, the highs and the lows, and the market crash that was kind of happening in that area, and people kind of buying homes, abandoning homes, foreclosures, all of these things that are kind of happening during, just previous to this, and what will happen again soon after this. But they had very stable jobs. They didn't have to worry about that. So the reason I bring that up is because there wasn't a lot of stress brought onto the family because of that. Because when we talk about incidences like this, we always have to kind of factor in what's going on around them and kind of look at that as far as the criminal acts go and, the things that happen leading up to them. I just wanted to point that out. But as far as we know, there wasn't anything kind of, as far as that goes, stress on the family. Talking about Tyler a little bit, he was described as kind of the average kid, nothing really that stood out as far as anything that you would think of with a normal teenage boy. It was reported that he had been born a premature baby, that his mother was induced a month before or 2 months before he was scheduled to be born. So when he was delivered, he weighed 3 pounds, I think, and 10 ounces. So he was a premature baby. He had to spend a month in the NICU, I believe. So he kind of started off life a little bit, maybe a step behind, but he ended up growing up normally. He was always kind of babied by his mother, which in a situation like this is to be expected. His parents weren't thought of as strict disciplinarians. And so you kind of have Tyler growing up with all of these things kind of going on in his life. He ended up not only gaining weight as a baby, but as he was getting older, he gained a lot of weight. He used to kind of get made fun of for his weight. So that is kind of what starts out some of the issues that Tyler is going to have. He started out with a eating disorder, and that eating disorder kind of morphed into several other things that we'll talk about. He had a problem with his weight, and so he tried to do different things to combat that. And then later on, he ends up getting on kind of a growth hormone type drug that was prescribed to him because he wanted to not be big as in overweight, but he wanted to be muscular, and he was having problems getting there. And when I was listening to the information I was reading about it, it seemed kind of strange to me that we had a child that was potentially overweight, then developed an eating disorder, and then somehow got on growth hormones. Now, I could have those two scenarios reversed, but the way that I read it, that was kind of the way it happened. And when Tyler was 10 years old, about 10 years old, this is whenever he kind of started acting out. He got put on different antidepressants and drugs from childhood up into his later teen years. And so he's really dealing with a lot of different issues that come from the eating disorder, the growth hormones, the drugs that he's being put on for his mood swings. And so he's got a lot going on as far as in that department. And when he's younger, it's about 10 years old, as I mentioned, he kind of starts to get a little rebellious, kind of starts getting in a little bit of trouble and kind of pressing the boundary lines a little bit. And his parents realize that Tyler may be a little bit of a difficult child to raise. There's going to be a lot of instances between him and his parents back and forth where they're going to butt heads about certain issues on his actions, kind of how he is raised, what their ideas are on how he should be raised, and kind of what he wants to do as far as his path goes. And it's a lot different than what his parents want for him. And it kind of starts to boil over. There's a lot of tension between Tyler and his parents. His parents, from what I understand, are really trying to reach out and show him as much love as they can. As I mentioned, they weren't really strict disciplinarians, but if there was a stricter one of the two, it was pointed out that Tyler's mom was that person. So if there was an instance where Tyler needed to be grounded or have his phone taken away or anything kind of in that nature of parenting, his mother, Mary Jo, was usually the one that did that. Now, it seemed odd because Mary Jo was the smaller of the two, and Blake was the it looked like Blake would have been the disciplinarian of the family. He was 6'1", around 300 pounds. He was a bigger guy. He looked like maybe that would have been his position, but what he's described as being is kind of a big old teddy bear. I know we hear that a lot, but that is kind of the way that he is described in the research that I did. So getting into some of the details leading up to the night that all of this unfolds, there is a lot of back and forth going between Tyler and his parents. As I mentioned, he is getting into trouble. He got arrested about 2 weeks previous to this, and he was grounded. He had his cell phone taken away, and this brought him a lot of resentment towards his parents. He did not like the way that they were kind of coming down on him. And for the most part, I believe, like, even though his mom took his cell phone away and she was kind of enforcing the rules on him, he looked at it from a perspective of, even though it's just his mom, he still feels this resentment for both of his parents, that he is getting angry at Blake and Mary Jo both, saying that they are causing him a lot of issues, that he doesn't like his parents, that he even talks about with people leading up to the incident, that he wishes or that he wants to kill his parents, that he wishes that he could kill his parents and then just throw like a killer party afterwards, like an awesome party. Everybody can come over and hang out. He doesn't have to worry about much because his parents are no longer there. And the one thing about this case that really kind of blows me away is, and we'll talk more about this in the debrief, but there is a lot of talk between Tyler and his friends and him saying that he wants his parents dead. Him saying that, like, hey, I wish my parents were dead. I should just kill my parents. It'd be better off if they're dead. I'm going to do it. You know, his friends even kind of pushing him along, like, hey, you should do it. And I don't know if that was in a way that they were joking with him, like, because most people say a lot of crazy things sometimes, and the majority of people do not act on the things that they say. Thank goodness. It'd be a really crazy world if it were the other way around. But in some parts of me believe that Tyler was saying things to his friends that now seem very telling of what the future holds. But at the time, I feel like they were thinking that this was all just a big joke. That, yeah, Tyler doesn't like his parents. You know, they make him go to church every Sunday. Maybe he doesn't agree with the way they're raising him. They're real, sticklers for the rules or whatever the scenario may go. And a lot of kids, especially this age, when you're in those teenage years, feel like this. I mean, I know that his friends were probably experiencing some of the same things that he was going through with their parents. I don't have any information saying that they were talking about killing their parents like he was, but a lot of people have this sort of deadlock where they feel like they're getting older. They should have more responsibilities. They know what's going on. They know what they're doing. I don't need anybody to tell me what to do. I don't need anybody to give me rules. I make my own rules, and you can have the opposite where, maybe a child does what their parents say, they graduate, they get out of the house or whatever happens, and then they go on about their business. But this is not that scenario. We have the opposite of that. Tyler is not having a good relationship with his parents because he does not agree with the things that they are asking him to do. He kind of wants to do his own thing. He wants to live his own life. He is on antidepressant medication. He is also using narcotics, and he is drinking heavily when all of this kind of starts to take place. So he's got a bad cocktail of things going on where he's mixing a lot of different drugs and alcohol together. Not to mention he has his medication that he's taking. So it's about to take us on a very wild ride. And so leading up to the incident, as I mentioned, he had gotten in trouble where he had been arrested and he had had his cell phone taken away from him. He was really upset about that. He kind of felt like that was his lifeline to his friends and family. I think most of us nowadays, especially, this is 2011, but he's 17 years old. But even now, we can agree with that to some extent because everything we do is on our cell phones for the most part. I mean, we don't have to carry around 15 different things with us. It's just all right there on your cell phone. And this was kind of Tyler's lifeline to his friends. And whenever he got that cell phone taken away from him, it was a big deal. Seems like not a big deal to me, but also I'm not a 17-year-old kid. And so I think you have to take that into consideration when you're talking about the events leading up to the death of his parents. And I know that that might be a spoiler alert for some people, but other people probably have got the hint that things are about to go south for them. Now, a couple weeks before the incident takes place, Tyler goes out of town with his dad. I believe his brother's there, but they go to Alabama to a family event of some kind. And even the people that are at this event the family members stated that they did not see anything that would make them think that something terrible was about to happen. Also, just before this event took place, Tyler was out with his family at a restaurant having dinner, and he ran into some friends afterwards, and he told them that, kind of the same line. He was out having dinner with his folks, and, they're a total drag, total bummer. He hated them. And then he tells one of the people that he runs into, he's like, hey, you want to come over to a party at my house tomorrow night? And the person's kind of like, how can you have a party at your house tomorrow night? He's like, your parents going to be cool with that? And he's like, no, it's cool, man. They're not going to be there. He's kind of already setting things in motion to the next day, right? He's got kind of some things that he's putting into motion, and now there has to be follow-up. So he's already made plans with people to have a party at his house, and there are going to be a few things that have to happen before this party can take place. And let me tell you, they are awful. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be one of those situations where we've talked about before where it's kind of like, this is one of those things where it's not going to be like boom and done. It's going to be a little bit more brutal than that. So let's get into the next day. The next day, July 16th, 2011, everything's kind of going as normal. Tyler is at his house with his parents. His father is in his bedroom, the parents' bedroom, and the mother is at the computer that is located in the dining room. They've kind of got a desk set up with the family computer at it, and she is sitting there kind of hanging out, doing things on the computer, and Tyler is kind of sitting by himself, and in my opinion, he is rehearsing what he is about to do, because all of these things that he's been telling his friends, that he wanted to kill his family, that he should kill his parents and have a killer party, that he should do all these things. He's really thinking about all these things. He really wants this to happen. For some reason, in his brain, he thinks that it would be a good idea to murder both of his parents and then throw a banger at his house afterwards, have a bunch of people over, have a bunch of booze, have a bunch of drugs, and really just get down. And so he's sitting there in his room thinking about this. He's planning it out. He is coming up with a plan on what he can do. And there's even talk about him kind of the night before, after he had left the dinner with his parents and running into his friend, of possibly rehearsing what he was going to do. So this carries into the next day. The next day, he's still kind of thinking it out and rehearsing what he's going to do. And what he decides on is that he should get a claw hammer, which does not sound like a very good idea to me because it is going to be very hard to do and also messy. But in this scenario, he doesn't have anything else he thinks he can use. I don't know if he kind of role play with a knife type scenario. I don't know if his ultimate goal was to be as brutal as possible, that maybe a knife or something of that along those lines would be too quote unquote clean, if you want to look at it that way, that he really wanted to make his parents suffer. And whatever the reason was that went into that, I'm not 100% on, but I can tell you that he landed on a claw hammer. And so just before the incident happens, it's around 5 p.m. and he goes into the garage. He retrieves a claw hammer. He goes back to his room. He listens to some music to kind of psych himself up and, to get ready for the events that are about to unfold. And he goes in, he gets his parents' cell phones and he hides them so that if in the event that something goes south, they cannot get their cell phones and call 911. They cannot call anybody to help them out. He takes some ecstasy. From what I read, it's about 3 pills of ecstasy is the way that they describe it, because he did not want to kill anybody while he was quote unquote sober. So he goes into the kitchen area where his mother is. He stands behind her from what is described as a full 5 minutes, which seems like a very long time to stand behind somebody with a claw hammer in your hand while you're rolling on ecstasy. And maybe nobody noticed. Maybe his mom did turn around. Maybe Mary Jo turned around and was like, "Hey, Tyler, what are you doing? Why are your pupils so wide?" "Oh, I don't know, just hanging out." "Okay. Do you have to stand that close to me with that claw hammer in your hand? This seems kind of funny." And he's like, "No, I'm about to do some carpentry." She's like, "All right, sounds good." But that part of it seems, and that could have been based off Tyler's recalling the events of this whole thing and just not having it very well put together. It seems hard for me to believe like that was a full 5 minutes, but I feel like I'm focusing a lot of time on something that's not very relevant, so I'll move on. So as he's standing there, he gets the idea that now is the time. He raises up the claw hammer, and I read a story that his uncle, an impact statement that his uncle gave, and from what I understand, he used the claw end of the hammer, not the blunt side of the hammer. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it would be extremely messy, and we'll get into that. He takes the hammer and he brings it up over his head and he swings it down over his mother, Mary Jo's head. Now, when he makes contact with her, she does not immediately go unconscious, and she looks at Tyler and she says, "Why? Why?" And he continues to hit her with this claw hammer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Blake, Tyler's dad, is in the bedroom next to the kitchen where all of this is taking place. So he comes out of the bedroom and sees his son whacking his wife in the head with this claw hammer. And he also looks at Tyler and says, like, "Why?" And I'm sure it's more like, "Hey, why? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? What's going on?" And so Tyler's response to this is, "Why the F not?" And from what I understand, he keeps repeating this as he's hitting his mother. "Why the F not?" Then he turns to his father and still says this. He keeps repeating it. Why the F not? Now, his father, as I mentioned earlier, 6'1", 300 pounds, he is in a position that he could defend himself if he wanted to. But as I also mentioned, he is more of the passive-aggressive type. And I don't find anything that tells me that Tyler's dad tried to defend himself in any way whatsoever. It appears to me that Blake let Tyler, if you want to say I know that he's in the process of being murdered, so it's not like he's just accepting it all the way, but he did not fight back whenever Tyler started attacking him. And he beat both of his parents in the head with a claw hammer until they were dead. And when we look at this, we would have to think that in a scenario like that, there has to be a lot of damaged items. A lot of things may have gotten broken. It's in the kitchen area. There's going to be blood everywhere because these are going to be head wounds. And we also have to consider that there's going to be blood spatter all over the place from him not only making contact with his parents' head, but also the swinging of the hammer every time he extends it out and then drops it back down. It's going to be slinging blood all over the place. So it seems to me like we'd have ourselves quite a bit of a mess in a scenario like this. Now, when the event was over and Tyler had killed both of his parents and he was for sure that they were gone, it states that he wraps their head in towels. And this to me seems like he doesn't want to look at his parents' faces or the damage that he did to his parents. He knows what he did. He can see what he did, but he doesn't like to look at it. So he has to cover them up. He wraps their heads in towels. Then he drags them from the kitchen area into their bedrooms. And we would have to assume that there is going to be blood trailing from the final resting location to the new location. And he laid the bodies side by side. He put them face down. I also think that's an attempt to not to have to look at them. And then he threw the hammer on the ground between them. Now, after this, he remembers, oh yeah, I'm going to have this killer party tonight, and I've already told people about it. Well, he also gets on social media and says, party at my house. Let me know or hit me up. He's like, hey, party at my house tonight. Parents are dead. Parents are out of town. Ain't going to be around. It's going to be good. Tell all your friends. And at this point in time, Tyler is not necessarily a largely popular kid. He's just kind of middle of the road, average guy. So he does have friends, but it's not going to be a situation where everybody's going to be like, ooh, Tyler's having a party. We need to get over there. This is going to be the event of the year. But it does end up getting the attention of enough people to eventually turn into a large party. But we can't have a large party with all this mess. It's a huge, there's a huge mess going on in this living room area or in this kitchen area. We got to get this thing cleaned up. So what Tyler does is he spends about 3 hours cleaning up all of the blood and additional things associated with this crime. And from the information in the article, it states that it took Tyler longer than he had anticipated. I'm sure 3 hours is a long time. But when he was cleaning this up, he decided that since his parents were already dead in their bedroom, might as well just throw all the incriminating evidence into that room. Any of the cleanup, any of the stuff, the hammer's already in there, the bodies are already in there. So let's just go ahead and take the rest of this stuff and throw it in the bedroom. And then that bedroom could just be the off-limits area of the house. Hey, I don't want y'all going into my parents' bedroom now. And that's going to be kind of a weird request based on the things that happen inside this house while the party is going on. But he takes any evidence that he could find that would incriminate him, and he throws it into the bedroom. There's like chairs from the kitchen table. There are a lot like lamps and assorted items, dishes, different things. And the way that I looked at it when I saw the picture is anything that was kind of in the field of vision that wasn't attached to the floor and was smaller than, like, say, your dining room table. Just kind of get all that, clean it all up if you can. If you can't clean it up, chunk it in the bedroom. After he gets all of these items into the bedroom, he starts kind of cleaning everything up. He gets some towels. He starts cleaning the blood up. He starts doing the best he can to basically, kind of the way I feel, is kind of spot mop this area. He makes an effort to clean it up, but he doesn't do it very well. And then after all of this, he takes the bloody towels and all the cleaning products and he throws those into the bedroom as well, and he shuts the door. Takes himself a shower, because you got to look fresh whenever you got people coming over to your house. So for my estimate, by the time he finishes up cleaning everything, it's probably 8 p.m. Then he continues to get the word out that that this party is going to take place. And then one of the interesting things that happens, I think, that kind of tells you what state of mind that Tyler's in whenever these murders have concluded, is that after he got out of the shower, he would later tell one of his friends, Michael, that he stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and he laughed. So the party starts around the 10:30, 11 p.m. mark, and it starts to grow. It says that there are, anywhere from, say 20 to 30 people that show up. Then those 20 to 30 people tell a friend. It's probably one of those things where it's like 10 people turns to 20, turns to 30, turns to 60, turns to 100. There ends up being a whole lot of people in this house for this party. And the way that it kind of starts out is that Tyler's telling everybody that his parents are out of town. He tells some of them that they have left to areas in Florida. He tells some of them that they are up in Alabama. He tells some of them that they have moved out and this is his house now. So you already kind of have that point where he's not even keeping track of the story that he's giving out to people. And I don't even know if he cares that he's not keeping up with the story that he gives out to people, because all of his actions kind of leading up to this get you to the point where you think, like, Tyler knows that there's no way he gets away with this. And the end result is that he ends up in jail. He knows all of this is going to happen. He knows that there's probably not a scenario that happens unless he takes his life that he ends up in jail, which he also kind of talks about with some people. He also mentions suicide from time to time. So at this point, I wouldn't say that that's completely off the table, but it's not something that has taken place now, or because we know the end of it, it's not something that takes place ever. He just talks about it. But this party kind of goes on, and as I mentioned, he was a little cautious about things in the beginning. Hey, make sure you stay out of this area. Hey, don't smoke in the house. We can party, we can do whatever we need to. And then that kind of starts rolling out of control. And then it kind of gets to like a no holds bar type situation where he's like, I don't care if you smoke in the house. I don't care about the house in general. There are pictures online. If you look this case up, if you type in Tyler Hadley crime photos, there's not any pictures of like his parents' bodies, but it kind of shows you the condition of the house from the living room to the kitchen to the bedroom, and just how trash this house was. It looked worse than what you would think a college frat house looks like after a huge party, a huge rager that happens, over a rush weekend or something like that. Whatever the craziest scenario you can think of, it looks worse than that. The couch in the living room is busted. The couch cushions are torn off of it. There's cigarette butts all over the place. They're put out in the carpet. They're thrown on the floor. They're put out on the countertops. They're in there breaking dishes. They are, leaving their trash all over the place. They're throwing beer cans all over the place. I mean, it gets to the point where he's kind of like, oh, well, do as you please. And he still has these kind of weird things that come about, which I think is him trying to delay himself from getting caught. One of the reasons he tells people that they can smoke in the house is because as the attendance of the party grows, more and more people are going outside to smoke. The more people that go outside, the more noise they make. He knows that it's going to make his neighbor mad. She's probably going to call the cops on him. That's when he's like, y'all go ahead and come in the house and smoke. One of the people at the party ends up tearing his neighbor's mailbox out of the ground and brings it into the living room. That makes him upset. He tells him to go put it back, or Tyler himself goes and puts it back. But everything just kind of getting wild. They're playing beer pong. They got the dining room table set up, and they got their cups on there. They're doing some beer pong action. But around the 2 a.m. time, a bunch of people that are at the party say that they heard about another party that was going on. So the majority of the people that are at this party, I believe, with the exception of around 20, so 80 people, 80% of the party gets in their vehicles and they all tear off at about 2 a.m. They're going to go to this other party. And so I kind of feel like that's kind of how they think of Tyler, like maybe he's secondary, because as soon as they heard of another party, they're like, maybe that one's a lot cooler. Why don't we go? And also, we've already trashed this whole place, so why don't we take it to the next spot? But they get over to this location and find out that that is not true. The person that was supposed to be having this party, it was not actually happening. It was only a rumor that she was going to be having a party. So everybody heads back en route to Tyler's house. Before they get back to Tyler's house, the police are actually called to the house for a noise complaint, something we can consider that would happen, something that happens all the time. And as Mike and I have talked about, something that happens a lot for police. We get noise complaints all the time that we have to go check out. We go look into it. If nothing seems out of the ordinary, we move on. Now, I kind of feel like this is a scenario where maybe we have the opportunity as police officers to look into this a little more. With everything that's happening, I don't expect the police to know that there are two dead people inside the house, but I would expect them to notice a younger looking person, someone who does not look to be 21 or perhaps looks close, but you want to check that out, and someone that is on a lot of drugs, which you would be able to tell from the pupil's body language. It mentions that Tyler is rubbing his hands together, clenching his fists, and doing that in a way that catches your attention. So if people that were at his party were noticing that, I feel like that would have been a good opportunity for the cops to notice that, but they don't notice it. And I understand this is a point where people say, like, the cops showed up to his house, they talked to Tyler for a few minutes, and then they left, because at this time, the majority of the people at this party are gone. And the 20 or so people that are left at the party, he's told to go back into his bedroom and be quiet. So I imagine the conversation that happened between the cops is he said, yeah, I was having a party over here, and everybody took off. They left. It's over. We're done. And the cops are probably like, good enough for me. We're out of here. Like, we don't have to look into this anymore. And so they left, thinking that perhaps they missed out on this big party that was going on, and the noise complaint may have come in beforehand, so there was nothing else to look into, and they left. I also like to point out that though I feel like this was a missed opportunity, there was nothing that could have happened in this case at this particular time that would have saved Tyler's parents. That may be a controversial opinion, but I just mean for this specific scenario, the cops showing up for the noise complaint, talking to Tyler, and leaving, yes, it could be a missed opportunity. It was a missed opportunity, but it would not have done anything in the hopes of saving Tyler's parents. And justice will be served as far as the rest of the case goes. So after the cops leave, it's now 2:30 a.m., people show back up to the house. The other party was a bust. Let's go back to Tyler's. We can keep drinking. After they get back to Tyler's house, the party continues on. While the party is still going on, Tyler has a few moments where he feels like telling people what he did. And he tells multiple people at this party that he has, in fact, killed his parents. Before all of the people are coming and going and leaving and the cops are called, Tyler does tell one of his friends, Michael, that he killed his parents. And his buddy Michael's like, no way, man. I don't believe you. So Tyler actually takes him and shows him certain areas of the house. And he even points out that there are telltale signs of this in the house and nobody's caught them. And the things that he is talking about is that if you go into the kitchen area and you look closely, you will see that there are dark brownish spots all over the place. It's still on the floor. There's literal droplets of blood on the floor. There is blood in the grout, in the tile. There is blood spatter on the ceiling. In the computer area where Tyler killed his mom, there is a weird brown substance smeared all over the keyboard. There are signs that a crime has occurred in this house, and nobody has noticed it up to this point because they're all partying. I mean, I guess I can get that in a sort of way. But even Tyler's friend Michael doesn't realize that all of this is going on. He's been friends with Tyler for a long time. He's been in the house a lot. He doesn't think anything's kind of out of the ordinary. He's not really looking for something. He's not really focusing on his surroundings. He's just at a party having a good time. But as Tyler starts to point these things out to him, he starts to take notice that a lot of the things that he is saying is true. A lot of the evidence that he's pointing out to the crime that he committed are indeed in plain view. They are right there in front of you if you just looked hard enough. But as I said, everybody's kind of partying. So Tyler even goes so far as to taking Michael into his parents' bedroom. And when Michael gets in there, he describes kind of seeing like a bunch of junk everywhere. There's like end tables and chairs and bloody towels and all the stuff that I mentioned earlier. He's seeing this in real time. And then as he's looking through all of this debris in the room, he sees a leg in the bottom of this debris. And then at that moment, he knows like, yeah, this is a real deal. Like what Tyler's saying is true. So does the friend immediately leave and call 911 or anything like that? Not necessarily. I mean, he hangs out at the party for another probably 3.5 hours, 3 hours or so before he takes off. And after Tyler shows Michael his parents' bedroom where the bodies are and all of the evidence, they go out to the garage. They continue their conversation. Michael turns to Tyler and says, "Hey, man, can I get a selfie with you? Because this is probably going to be the last selfie I get with him before he ends up in prison." So they literally take a selfie together, standing in the garage, both kind of somber looking, not really a whole lot of facial expression or anything like that. Just a party selfie. And this picture is also available online. If you look it up, you can kind of check out and see what that is. Or I would really suggest going to that Rolling Stones article because you can look at all the information as it's laid out, and then they have a ton of pictures on that actual site as well. So you can kind of get a one-stop shop. So after all this happens, the party continues. When Michael does decide to leave, it is around the 4:00 a.m. time frame, and some of the numbers are different depending on what you look at. But the main point of this whole timeline is that at 4:40 a.m., the party's basically over. Everybody's kind of heading out, and which I would think so. I mean, it's almost 5 o'clock in the morning. But Tyler goes ahead and goes back on Facebook, and he posts another message to his Facebook wall, that main screen. And he says, "Party at my house again, hit me up." So at this point in time, after all of this partying, all the drinking, all the drug use, let's not forget the murder of his parents, he decides, you know what? Man, I should have another party tomorrow. Why stop having a good time when it feels so good? I could just have another party tomorrow. Then maybe I'll have to deal with what's coming to me. But that doesn't happen because even though his buddy Michael saw Tyler's dead parents, saw the bedroom, saw all the evidence, took the selfie with him, said nothing at first, hung out with him for an additional 3 hours. which he could have been thinking to himself, like, I'll hang out with my good buddy one last time. He goes home, he calls Crime Stoppers, and he reports the murder. At 4:32 a.m., this call goes in. So this is just 8 minutes before Tyler is going to post the Facebook message. So between the call going into Crime Stoppers, then getting over to dispatch, to the cops getting dispatched out to the house, I'm not sure how much time goes by, but the cops don't waste any time getting to the residence, but we do know that it had to have been after 4:40 a.m. Now, when the officers arrive at the house, they park across the street a little bit down the road. They walk up. They can hear someone inside the house talking. When the police officer looks through the window, he can see Tyler inside the house, pacing back and forth, and he is talking to himself. The officers make entry into the house. They notice, at the onset that there are empty beer bottles and red plastic Solo cups everywhere. There were pots and pans that were kind of left and strung about all over the kitchen counter. Tyler's bedroom was littered with unraveled cigars. So somebody in there maybe rolling blunts or something. And on the bed, there were approximately 15 empty beer cans and beer bottles. Also, a bottle of women's perfume. So no telling what was going on in there. The furniture in his brother's bedroom, his old bedroom, before he moved, it was all turned over. The floor was covered with clothing and bedding, and locked inside the closet, they found the family's black Labrador. That poor dog. So as the cops passed through the kitchen and they approached the master bedroom, it was locked, and the officers noticed that there were streaks of blood, dried blood, on the frame and baseboards of the floor. And at this point, they had already taken Tyler into custody. They'd already put him in handcuffs, but he says, like, hey, y'all don't go in there. Y'all aren't welcome in there. All right. And at this point, when the cops get to the door, they force the door open. They gain entry into the bedroom, and they see everything that I have told you guys about before this. They notice that the room is in disarray. They start looking through the contents of the room. They find Blake and Mary Jo's body, and Tyler is officially under arrest for the capital murder of his parents, or what I would consider to be capital murder. Now, a lot of things are going to go into the trial because Florida has a law that states that 17-year-olds cannot be put on death row. If we look at kind of a timeline of how this goes down, we've got July 16th, 2011 is the initial date when the murders occur. In 2014, 3 years later, 2.5 to 3 years later, Tyler is going to be convicted of the murders of his parents, and he is going to be sentenced to life in prison. 2 years later, in 2016, the sentence itself is overturned by an appeals judge who says that the original trial judge did not consider the correct alternate to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because if I forgot to mention that earlier, he did get life without the possibility of parole. All of his waking days were going to be spent in prison. Now, it's going to take an additional 2 years, 2018, before he goes back to trial for resentencing. So they're not going to do the trial over. They're not going to go through the regular processes of a trial. They are just going to do the sentencing phase of the trial. He's already been found guilty. The guilty verdict still stands. But you are going to have attorneys from both sides that are going to talk about the events that led up to the murders. They're going to talk about the murders themselves. They're going to bring in family members to do impact statements. They're going to kind of do all that process over again. But after it's all said and done, Tyler is sentenced again to life, but this time with the possibility of parole. That's the information that I have found so far as that goes on his sentencing. I will look into that before next week's episode to make sure that I got that correct. I did find a source for that, but I did not double check it. So I'll go back and double check and make sure that he, on his second sentencing, was given life with parole. because that does give Tyler, based on his age, an opportunity to get out of jail after, I believe, 40 years. But that is where we are going to end this episode. Mike and I are going to come back and do the debrief on this because, as I mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of things that are happening while this party's going on, a lot of happenings between friends and party goers, statements that are made, and we'll kind of dive more into the things that were going on in Tyler's life that perhaps led up to this or may have at least give us some reason why we got to this. It should be a really good debrief. The reason that we decided to do this case, as I mentioned earlier, is Mike and I were talking about the case, and we really wanted to do a debrief episode on this. So I wanted to jump in, give you guys the basic facts up front, and then we'll move to the part 2 debrief episode. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Please remember, go over there and do all the things on Apple and Spotify. Hit the 5 stars, leave us a review. It helps us out so much. I appreciate everyone that's done that so far. Slowed down a little bit since the last couple of weeks. We haven't got any new reviews, but maybe you listening right now that haven't left us a review on Apple, maybe you're the one that goes on there and does it. Be pretty cool if you did. So, all right, guys, I'm going to leave it there for this episode of The Murder Project. I will talk to you guys again soon. Goodbye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook. We're at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, you can type in facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, don't forget to go over to whatever platform you're listening on. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if it's available. If you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and tap that 5 stars if you don't mind. If you're listening on Apple, subscribe to the show, hit the 5 stars, and please leave us a review. We appreciate it so much. If you have a longer form question or comment you need to reach out to us for, we have an email address. It's contact@themurderproject.com. And as always, Mike or myself will get back to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. I look forward to speaking to you in the future. But before I go, please remember, head up, eyes up, stay alive.